David Hartman, owner of Fantastic Endeavors Travel Agency, here with a cruise travel update. Why? Because cruising from unvaccinated travelers is back. And I'm going to cover what you need to know if you're unvaccinated and whether or not you can cruise and what cruises are fit for you. Why? Because cruising is back for everybody. Finally, it took a couple of years and there were some minor exceptions and there were testing protocols for all passengers. Now, most of that's by the wayside. I'm going to cover in today's show what you need to know as far as the testing requirements and which cruises you can go on and which cruise lines you can go on, and a tip for you at the end if what you should do next if you have any future cruise credits out there. First off, the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, dropped all COVID guidelines on cruising July 18th, and that took the handcuffs off. That was like, woof, okay. Now the cruise line can self-regulate themselves like they did for many, many, many years before they were under stringent protocols from the CDC, which honestly were unrealistic since cruising went back. They had to keep fighting to get easier protocols, and no other industry was under such scrutiny, and it was really unfair. Finally, out of nowhere, CDC goes, okay, you're fine, you're good. And well, everyone's like, whoa. And then one by one, the cruise lines started making announcements. It started with Norwegian Cruise Line, then Carnival, and now all the big boys have fell into step. But I will talk about in a second, some aren't moving so fast on these protocols. But the news is, yes, most major cruise lines now allow unvaccinated passengers. Notice the big asterisk in the banner. Why is the asterisk there? Because they can't control the destinations they sail from or they go to. So first off, clearly, you can sail on 6-night cruises or less with most major cruise lines and from U.S. ports only. In other words, sailing from some parts of the Caribbean, sailing from Europe, sailing from Canada, no, they still have requirements in place, which may go away soon. My codicil to show is everything I'm saying right now could be gone tomorrow. Now, what else can we do with this? Why not longer cruises? Because the threat is the longer you're on board, the longer the threat of COVID. So right now, 6-night cruises. But some major cruises like Norwegian and Carnival are doing all cruises, any length from the ports that they allow to proclaim unvaccinated travel, where U.S. is allowing it, that is allowed. I expect others to follow suit. I'm going to Europe soon for some travel to Germany. And already some of the restrictions in place there are dropping. And as those restriction countries drop, that means the ports of call will drop restriction too. So if you have a Europe trip booked and a cruise, say early next year, say mid next year, summer next year, you're fine. We expect everything to be fine then. Now, COVID test is required if you're unvaccinated, but not at the terminal. That's huge. Now, why is that significant? We'll talk about in a second. No testing requirement for unvaccinated passengers. And this is pretty uniform from cruise line to cruise line. So no testing requirement if you're vaccinated at all. Now, why is this significant? I want to talk about this for a second. Because I sailed 3 times last year. In June, the first cruise back ever. Check out that review on my Fantastic Endeavors YouTube channel. Please subscribe. And we got on board. We showed a vaccination card, no testing requirement, no mask, boom. But that was before the Delta variant. After the variant, cruise lines went a different direction, which hopefully we won't ever see again. And if you have a question on this, please put this in the chat and I'll answer it. It's very clear that now with that removed, there's no threat of you not boarding. 2 cruises last year, a Disney Magic Cruise and MSC Seashore Cruise. I had to take a test at Miami Terminal and twiddle my thumbs and wait around. I wasn't concerned, but I guess I could have been more concerned because there was a threat that if I tested positive, they retest me. If I tested positive again, I would not sail. So a lot of people sailed for almost over a year plus until this September now, with the threat of not sailing. So that's huge. They've dropped that requirement. And even Disney Cruise Line, I'll talk about at the end how conservative they are. They also dropped that requirement. So the testing for unvaccinated passengers is at-home testing or the drugstore testing. Have it done in the time frame. I'm not going to mention it because each cruise line does it differently. Whatever time frame the cruise line gives you, make sure to follow that protocol so it's done in the correct time frame, and you'll be fine to board. As long as it's a negative test, you're allowed to board. Good to go. Unvaccinated, again, no test requirement. Woohoo! Just like it was last summer when I sailed. Go figure. Now, another point is restricted ports of call are possible. So you can sail from the U.S., but depending on where the cruise is going, the port of call may not be available for you to disembark. You can stay on the ship, but you can't get off it. You'll know that before the cruise normally, but with upticks in COVID in certain places, and people are still concerned, even though we're kind of past the pandemic stage, we're in the endemic stage where it's just isolated, where it's part of our lifestyle now. Some small countries can't handle that, and they're going to have restrictions. So just know that when you sail in the Caribbean, some ports of call may be restricted. You still cruise, but you may not be able to get off the boat. Rare exception, but it could happen. Now, which cruise lines are the most receptive to unvaccinated travelers? And I applaud the ones that are being fully flexible, and I will chastise the ones that are not being flexible. Norwegian, I mentioned. Carnival, MSC's wide open. Virgin Voyages, they were a little late to announce. Now, like, woohoo, wide open, come on board. And again, some of them are not even having testing requirements. Just know before you go what they do when you book it. If you book it through a travel agent like myself and Fantastic Endeavors, we'll help you out with that information. If you book on your own or through somewhere else, make sure you have the proper documentation. And note, when you check in online, that will be the most up-to-date information. Always check in online with any carrier you go on, airline or cruise line, because they give the most up-to-date protocols to travel on that carrier. The ones that need some help and they're getting better are Royal Caribbean, Celebrity, Princess Holland America. Princess Holland America, even though they're part of Carnival Corporation, they're mostly doing this because of their destinations and their demographic. Princess for the destination, Holland America, because they attract an older demographic. They're being a little more conservative. My friends booked on Prince right now are waiting for an exception, unvaccinated. By the time they sail, they're not going to need it. I think they've already announced that they're going to out of California, U.S. port, going to Mexico, which is wide open, always been wide open. Royal Caribbean Celebrity, I just got to hit them on the wrist. I'm like, what were you doing? Ever the cruise line saying, hey, you can sail from the U.S., unvaccinated. They go, oh, you can sail from the U.S., and I have clients with future cruise credits waiting to sail. They expire end of the year. They're not going to extend them any longer, we don't think. And they go, we can sail from the U.S., but only like L.A., New Orleans, and Houston. We're like, your biggest cruise ports are in Florida. What are you doing? Like, what is the logic behind this? And finally, they had to give in to pressure, I guess. I don't know. Like 2 weeks later, they announced it, and my client knew before I did and called me to book, and finally been waiting for 2 years. She can finally go on her cruise unvaccinated. So shame on you, Royal Caribbean Celebrity. You should pay more attention to the trends of the cruise industry and kind of step it up. Especially Royal Caribbean needs to step it up when handling cruise passengers right now. Disney Cruise Line. Oh, I love Disney, and their customer service amazing. It's the best experience at sea. But they're a bit more conservative because they're Disney and they cater to, I guess, a younger clientele, which makes no sense. But they require vaccination as of today, as of this, live show, up until 12 and up. I mean, all adults and older children too. Testing requirements are variant now. No more terminal testing. I think everyone's done with terminal testing. They're happy to be done with it. They said, you know what? Everyone else is doing it. Hell, you can fly without a test for 2 years. And that's huge. Again, no threat of sitting in a terminal and not going on board. I just talked to a client. I booked on a Disney cruise, and we ended up booking them back-to-back. Transatlantic Disney cruise in a suite. They booked a suite, Norwegian coming back, tested positive, ended their cruise. Because of May this year, it was still the restrictions. Had to wait 10 days in Barcelona. Because they didn't test negative, they couldn't board their second cruise. Wah, wah. That threat is now over. Again, that was Europe, so that's a little different. But the problem was the protocol of the U.S. requiring that quarantine, which is now gone. So you now can cruise freely. And again, know the restrictions if the cruise line. Don't just book a 7-day cruise. Know if that cruise line, and I can't list them all here because it's changing every day, or work with your travel agent and figure out, say, hey, I'm unvaccinated. What can I sail at this date guaranteed? And don't just assume they're going to relax it, although it looks pretty good. I expect it won't get any worse, but some cruise lines like Disney may not relax it, hence why the banner is still up. All regulations discussed are subject to change. That's very obvious. I do believe that It'll only get better, not worse. What happened last year with cruising opening and me going on a cruise with just a vaccination card, not even a mask in the terminal, that was it, not in the ship, and no test requirement, that was amazing. They get so much worse when Delta hit, but Delta really hit us so hard because we all thought we were done. But now we know there's waves of this thing, and it's now with vaccines out there and herd immunity, we're in a good shape. I don't expect a return to vaccination requirements at all. You may just see a restriction in the ports, and you may just be a restriction in capacity, and may see a return to the testing requirement. I'm crossing my fingers, no, at the terminal, but I don't expect it. People get sick on board ships, and the amount of sick on board from COVID are far less ever than they have norovirus outbreaks. But some reason that doesn't make the news anymore because people's stomach sickness is an old thing. So if you read the news, people getting sick on board, so, oh my God, it's setting people sick. That's like 0.5% of the population. That is a normal cruise. It's not unheard of for people to get sick on a cruise ship or anywhere else. Actually, hotels have more sickness than cruise ships, but they don't have to report them, so you don't hear about them. That's a true fact. My closing tip to you, if you have future cruise credits, do not wait. Don't expect they'll extend it, and don't think you can go to your travel agent or your cruise rep or your cruise line and get an extension. Book them now. Get a cruise on the books. You can always move that cruise date once it's booked, because most of them that I know of expire either like end of this month or end of this year. That's it. They're done. The cruise lines want this off their books, and they have had it. We have had it. No more credits. That's it. Unless, again, you are booked and then are canceled for a reason that they caused. Obviously, they'd give you a new credit. But current credits have been pending out there. I got a few in my file over here on my desk next to my cruise ship here. And I'm like calling my people saying, guys, you got to use this. They're not going to give you a refund if it wasn't canceled that way, or if you missed the deadline. They're not going to change their mind on that. They want you to cruise, and please take advantage of that. As always, I'm a full-service travel agency specializing in cruise travel. I've sailed on most major cruise lines, including the one behind me here. And it's very important to work with a professional in these days of vigorous regulations. You need to contact me, 305-453-9208, dave@bucketwishtrip.com. This is the Enjoy the Journey Luxury Travel Show. We make this show to inspire, educate our people watching, to inspire them on their next bucket list trip through education and knowledge about destinations. As always, reach out to me directly on social media too. If you have any questions, I'm always here to help. I am your resource. Well, that's it. Cruising is back, and unvaccinated can cruise. And please reach out to me if you need any help getting there, because please get on a ship. Cruising is back, and hope to see you on board.